The observation room hummed with quiet confusion. Instructor Velmora pressed her three-fingered hand against the glass, her large herbivore eyes fixed on the monitors below. Something was wrong with the training program. Something that made no sense according to every behavioral model she had studied in her 40 years of teaching. On the screens, 50 cadets moved through the survival training complex. Most were predator species, carefully selected from across the galaxy. Krathen with their golden manes and razor claws. Vexians, who resembled the wolves of Earth, though none of the instructors had ever seen a wolf. Thurians, massive and bear-like with strength enough to crack titanium. These were the elite, the dangerous, the competitors who would become the galaxy's finest warriors. And then there was the human. Cadet Jake Chen sat on a metal bench in the common area, eating his small portion of protein paste. He was unremarkable by any standard. Medium height, brown hair, no claws or fangs or natural armor. His species had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago, and this was the first human to attend the Academy's elite program. The instructors had accepted him mostly out of curiosity. Velmora watched as a young Krathen named Rexus approached the human. She leaned forward. Rexus was one of the most aggressive cadets in the cohort, known for stealing food from weaker students and establishing dominance through intimidation. The human should have been an easy target, but Rexus did not attack. Instead, he did something that made Velmora's ears flatten against her skull in confusion. The Krathen cadet placed half of his own food portion on the human's plate and walked away. "Replay that," Velmora said to her assistant. They watched it again, and again. There was no threat display from the human, no dominance behavior. Jake had barely looked up from his meal. He had nodded once, said something too quiet for the microphones, to catch, and accepted the food as if this was completely normal. "Has the human been trading something?" Velmora asked. "Contraband? Favors?" Her assistant, a younger instructor named Pix, shook his head. "We have checked everything. The human has nothing to trade. He barely speaks to the others outside of required exercises." Velmora pulled up Jake's file on her datapad. Born on Earth, rural area, raised on something called a ranch. Parents worked with animals. No military background. Psychological profile showed him as calm, observant, and surprisingly stress-resistant. But nothing that explained why a predator would willingly give up food. The survival training program was designed to be harsh. Limited resources, competitive scenarios, constant pressure. It forced cadets to establish hierarchies, to fight for what they needed, to prove their strength. Herbivore species like Velmora's people had designed it this way because they understood that predators needed structure and clear dominance chains to function in military units. Except the predators were not establishing dominance over the human. They were doing the opposite. Over the next 3 days, Velmora documented 12 separate incidents. A Vexian named Kira brought water to Jake during a training exercise. 2 Thurian cadets carried his equipment during a march. Another Krathen stepped between Jake and an aggressive rival during a confrontation, protecting the human without being asked. The human never demanded any of this. He never commanded, never threatened, never even raised his voice. He simply existed among them, and the predators changed their behavior around him. In the training yard, Velmora watched Jake work with a small group on a tactical problem. The instructors had given them a puzzle that required cooperation, but most groups dissolved into arguments about who should lead. Jake's group was different. The Krathen and Vexians listened when he spoke. They offered suggestions, and he considered them. When a large Thurian named Gorn suggested an approach that Jake disagreed with, the human did not snap or snarl. Instead, Jake tilted his head slightly, maintained soft eye contact, and said, "That could work, but what about the power grid here?" He pointed at the map. "If we go that route, we expose our flank." Gorn studied the map and nodded slowly. "You are right. We use your plan. No fight. No posturing. Just acceptance." Velmora made notes on her pad. The human's body language was unusual. He did not make himself small and submissive like prey species did around predators. But he also did not puff up and challenge like predators did with each other. He held himself in a strange middle ground, confident but not aggressive, present but not demanding. That evening, she reviewed footage from the sleeping quarters. The cadets had been assigned individual bunks, each separated by privacy screens. But the predator species had reorganized themselves. Jake's bunk was now in the center of the room, and the others had moved their bunks into a loose circle around him. They had done this without permission, violating the rules, but none of the predators seemed to care about potential punishment. Velimora called up the file on human evolution. She read about Earth's history, about the various predator species that had lived alongside humans. Most prey species in the galaxy avoided predators whenever possible. Humans had done something different. They had befriended wolves. They had turned predators into partners, into something called dogs. The relationship had lasted tens of thousands of years. Could that be it? Had this changed humans somehow? She scheduled an interview with Cadet Chen for the following morning. Jake arrived at her office looking tired but calm. He sat in the chair she indicated and waited, his hands resting loosely in his lap. Not fidgeting, not tense, just present. Cadet Chen, Velimora began, I need to ask you about your relationships with the other students. Is something wrong? Jake asked. That is what I am trying to determine. The predator species in your cohort are behaving unusually around you. They share resources with you. They protect you. They have rearranged their sleeping area to keep you at the center. Can you explain this? Jake frowned, thinking, I guess they are just being friendly. Predator species in survival training are not friendly. They are competitive. They establish hierarchies through conflict. You should be at the bottom of that hierarchy, yet you appear to be at the center. What are you doing to create this effect? The human looked genuinely confused. I am not doing anything special. I just treat them like people. Listen to them. Try to be fair. Back home I worked with dogs, and you learn pretty quick that respect works better than force. Dogs, Velimora repeated. These are the domesticated Earth predators? Yeah. We had working dogs on the ranch. Herding dogs, guardian dogs. You have to understand how they think, what they need, when to be calm and when to be firm, when to give them space and when to step in. Jake shrugged. I guess I just do the same thing here. Velimora made more notes. The human did not even realize what he was doing. It was instinctive, learned from childhood, as natural to him as breathing. Are you attempting to establish yourself as pack leader? She asked. Pack leader? Jake shook his head. No, nothing like that. I am just trying to get through training like everyone else. But that was not what was happening. Whether Jake understood it or not, the predator cadets had accepted him as something important to their group structure, not a leader in the way the instructors understood leadership. Something else. Something the herbivore instructors had no framework to comprehend. Velimora dismissed the cadet and sat alone in her office for a long time. She pulled up communication channels to the academy leadership. This needed to be reported. The entire training program might need to be revised, but first, she needed to understand what was really happening. And that meant watching the human more closely. Because if one human could change the behavior of an entire cohort of predators, without even trying, what would happen when humans actually understood what they could do? The question worried her more than she wanted to admit. The Academy's leadership took Velimora's report seriously enough to approve extended observation protocols. Hidden cameras were installed throughout the training complex. Behavioral specialists from 3 different herbivore species joined the study. They treated it like a scientific mystery, which was exactly what it was. The lead administrator, a tall insectoid named Chixthar, wanted answers quickly. We need to understand if this is a threat, he said during the briefing. If humans can manipulate predator species without those species even knowing, this changes everything about galactic power structures. Velimora was not sure it was manipulation. But she kept that thought to herself. They began with stress tests. The instructors designed scenarios that should have broken the unusual bond between Jake and the predators. They limited food even further. They forced competition for resources. They created situations where helping the human would cost the predators significant advantages. Nothing worked the way it should have. In one exercise, cadets had to cross an obstacle course while carrying weighted packs. The fastest 10 would get full meal rations. The rest would get half portions. Jake was not a fast runner compared to the predator species. He should have finished near the bottom. Instead, a Vexian named Kira ran alongside him, matching his pace. When Jake stumbled on a climbing wall, she waited at the top, offering encouragement. They both finished outside the top 10. Kira accepted her half rations without complaint. The instructors pulled Kira aside. "Why did you not run ahead?" they asked. "You could have easily placed in the top 5. Kira's ears twitched in confusion. "Why would I leave him behind?" "Because you would have gotten more food." "Food is not everything," Kira said, and the instructors had no response to that. They tried separation next. Jake was pulled from the cohort for 3 days under the excuse of medical testing. The instructors watched what happened to the predators without him. The results were dramatic. Arguments increased. Training performance dropped. 2 Krathens got into an actual fight that required instructor intervention. The Vexians became nervous and aggressive. Even Calm Gorn, the massive Thurian, seemed agitated. On the second day, Rexus approached Velmora during a training break. The young Krathen's tail lashed in barely controlled anger. "Where is Jake?" Rexus demanded. "Cadet Chen is undergoing medical evaluation. That is not your concern." "When does he return?" "That is classified information." Rexus's claws extended slightly. "Not a threat, but close. We need him back." Velmora made herself stay calm, though her instincts screamed at her to flee from the predator. "Why? He is just another cadet." "No," Rexus said flatly. "He is not." The Krathen walked away before she could ask what he meant. Jake returned on the 4th day. The change in the predators was immediate. The tension drained from the group. Training performance improved. The fight stopped. It was like watching a pack of Earth dogs reunite with a beloved human. Though none of the instructors had that reference point. Velmora scheduled another interview with Jake. This time she had done more research. She had spent hours reading about Earth, about human evolution, about the relationship between humans and wolves that had started sometime in the deep past of human history. "Cadet Chen, I need you to help me understand something," she said when he sat down. "On Earth, your species domesticated wolves. Can you explain how that relationship worked?" Jake looked surprised by the question. Well, it happened thousands of years ago. Wolves and humans started hunting together, sharing food. Over time, the friendliest wolves stayed close to human camps. Eventually, they became dogs. We bred them for different jobs. Herding, guarding, hunting, companionship. "And you grew up with these dogs?" "Yeah, we had maybe 15 dogs on the ranch at any time. Working dogs, mostly. Australian Shepherds, Border Collies, a couple of Great Pyrenees for guarding the livestock." "What did you learn from them?" Jake thought about it. "I guess I learned that they are not so different from us. They have feelings, personalities. Some are confident, some are nervous. Some want to lead, others want to follow. You have to read their body language, understand what they are telling you, and they are reading you too all the time. Dogs know when you are scared or angry or calm. They respond to your energy. And you use these same skills here? With the other cadets? I guess?" Jake shrugged. "I just try to pay attention. Like Rexus acts tough, but he is actually pretty insecure. He needs to know someone has his back. Kira is smart but overthinks things. So sometimes you just need to make a decision so she can stop worrying. Gorn is solid, but he needs to feel useful. It is not complicated, but it was complicated. What Jake described so casually was a skill that most species in the galaxy did not have. Herbivores had learned to read predators only enough to know when to run. Other predators read each other through dominance displays and aggression. Jake was doing something different. He was reading emotion, intention, need. Velmora tried a different approach. "Do you feel like you are leading them?" "No," Jake said immediately. "We are all just getting through training together. But they listen to you. They follow your suggestions. They protect you. They listen because I listen to them. And I don't need protection. They are my friends. Friends." The word hung in the air. Velmora had never considered that predators and prey, or even predators and different predators, could be genuine friends. The Academy operated on the assumption that military units required clear hierarchy and command structure. But Jake's group had something that looked more like family. The instructors decided to try one more test. They introduced another cadet from a smaller, weaker species, a Pixan who was physically similar to Jake in terms of lack of natural weapons. If the predators were simply helping weaker cadets out of some misguided compassion, they should treat the Pixan the same way they treated Jake. They did not. The Pixan was ignored at best, bullied at worst. No one brought him food. No one protected him. When he struggled during exercises, the predators left him behind. It was exactly how the instructors expected predator species to behave, which meant Jake was special somehow. Not because he was weak, but because of something else. Velomora found Jake in the library one evening reading on a datapad. She sat down across from him without being invited. "I have been studying earth animals," she said. "Wolves, dogs, but also others. Horses, cats, even birds. Your species has a pattern of forming partnerships with other species." "Why?" Jake looked up from his reading. "I never really thought about it. I guess humans are social. We like company. And animals offer something people sometimes don't, you know? Loyalty without politics. Affection without strings attached. But you also change those animals. Dogs are not wolves anymore. Horses are not wild. You shaped them over generations." "Yeah, but they changed us too," Jake said. "Dogs taught us things about hunting, about loyalty. Horses changed how we traveled and built civilizations. It was not a one-way thing." Velomora felt something click into place in her mind. The relationship between humans and predator animals had not been about dominance. It had been about mutual benefit, mutual change. And somehow that ancient partnership had left humans with an instinctive understanding of how predator minds worked. "The other cadets?" Velomora said carefully. "Rexus, Kira, Gorn, the others? You see them as pack, don't you? Even if you do not use that word." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I see them as people I care about." "Is that the same thing?" Maybe it was. Maybe that was exactly what pack meant. Velomora left the library with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. The Academy's entire approach to training predator species might be wrong. They had been using fear and rigid structure to control natural aggression. But Jake was achieving better results with something that looked a lot like trust and belonging. The question was what to do with that information. Because if word got out that humans had this ability, that they could naturally lead predator species in ways herbivores never could, it would change everything about galactic politics. And Velomora was not sure the galaxy was ready for that change. The final test came without warning, which was the entire point. At 0300 hours, alarms blared through the cadet barracks. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. The instructors' voices came through speakers, clipped and urgent. "All cadets to the transport bay immediately. This is not a drill. You have 5 minutes." Jake grabbed his go bag and ran with the others. Around him, the predator cadets moved with predatory efficiency. But he noticed they kept him in the middle of their group, protecting him instinctively even in the chaos. In the transport bay, Instructor Chixthar stood on a raised platform, his insectoid features impossible to read. "You are being deployed to Theta 7, a hostile moon in the outer rim. A distress beacon has been activated. Your mission is to locate the source, rescue any survivors, and return to the extraction point. You have 72 hours. Resources are limited. The environment is dangerous. Many of you will fail. Some may not return." Jake felt his heart rate spike, but he kept his breathing steady. Around him, the predators shifted nervously. This was real, not a training exercise. Actual danger. They were loaded onto dropships, the entire cohort split into 3 groups. Jake's group included Rexus, Kira, Gorn, and 12 other predators. They descended through the moon's thin atmosphere in tense silence. Theta 7 was a nightmare landscape of jagged rocks, toxic geysers, and extreme temperature swings. Their supplies included minimal food, basic shelter materials, and survival equipment. Not enough for everyone if resources were not shared carefully. The moment they landed, one of the Krathens, an aggressive male named Zarth, took charge. "We split the supplies evenly, then separate into small groups. Better chance of finding the beacon that way." Jake frowned. "Splitting up in unknown terrain is dangerous. We should stay together, pool resources." Zarth's golden eyes fixed on Jake with barely concealed contempt. "And why should we listen to you, soft skin? You are the weakest here. If anyone should be left behind, it is you." Several predators growled at that, but Zarth ignored them. "I am fastest, strongest. I lead." Jake did not rise to the challenge. He simply looked at the group, reading their body language. Most of them were looking between him and Zarth, uncertain. Some were watching Zarth with flattened ears or tense postures. They did not trust him. Kira stepped forward. Jake's plan makes more sense. Unknown terrain, limited supplies, potential hostiles. We are stronger together. We are stronger without dead weight, Zarth snarled. Gorn, the massive Thurian, moved to stand beside Jake. He said nothing, but his presence spoke volumes. Then Rexus joined them, then others. Within moments, most of the group had physically positioned themselves with Jake, leaving Zarth isolated. The Krathen looked shocked, then angry. You would follow a human over your own kind? He is our own kind, Rexus said quietly. You are the one who does not understand that. Zarth could have fought. His muscles tensed, claws extending, but facing down the entire group, even he could see the odds. He backed down with a frustrated snarl and grabbed his portion of supplies, moving to the edge of the group. Jake did not gloat or celebrate. He simply nodded once and turned to the task at hand. Okay, let's assess what we have and make a plan. They inventoried supplies. 3 days of water, maybe 4 if they were careful. 2 days of food. Medical supplies, environmental suits, and a portable scanner for finding the distress beacon. Not enough to waste, not enough to hoard. Jake divided tasks based on what he had learned about each cadet over the past weeks. Kira, you have the best hearing. You and the other Vexians form a perimeter while we set up base camp. Rexus, you are good with tech. Get that scanner working. Gorn, we need shelter from those geysers. Think you can handle that? Everyone moved to their tasks without argument. Even Zarth, after a moment of hesitation, joined the perimeter patrol. Jake noticed but did not comment. The Krathen needed space to process his wounded pride. As they worked, Velmora and the other instructors watched from orbit, monitoring everything through the cadets' suit cameras. The observation room was crowded with Academy leadership, all wanting to see how the human phenomenon held up under genuine pressure. They are organizing efficiently, Chixthar noted. Better than the other 2 groups. On the other screens, the remaining cadets were struggling. One group had already fractured into arguments about who should lead. The other had a clear alpha, but the dominant predator was hoarding resources and making poor tactical decisions. Jake's group had a different problem. The environment. On the second day, they finally located the distress beacon. It was coming from a crashed research vessel wedged in a ravine. The good news was they had found survivors. The bad news was getting to them required crossing a field of unstable ground that cracked with every step, revealing pools of acidic liquid below. We need to move fast and light, Jake said, studying the terrain. Too much weight and the ground will collapse. I will go, Gorn volunteered. I am strongest. I can carry survivors. You are also heaviest, Jake pointed out gently. That ground will not hold you. We need someone lighter. Kira stepped forward. Vexians are built for speed and agility. I can cross safely. Before Jake could respond, Zarth pushed past them both. I will do it. I am fastest. It was the first time Zarth had volunteered for anything. Jake studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but not alone. Kira goes with you. You watch each other's backs. Zarth looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Jake's calm expectation made him stop. He nodded curtly. The 2 predators crossed the unstable ground with careful steps. Jake and the others watched tensely as cracks spread beneath their feet. Once Zarth stumbled and Kira immediately steadied him. He looked surprised but accepted the help. They reached the crashed vessel and found 2 survivors, both injured but alive. Getting them back across the broken ground took another hour of careful work. When they finally made it to solid ground, both Zarth and Kira were exhausted. Jake immediately rationed out water for them. You did good, he said simply. Zarth accepted the water without meeting Jake's eyes. Something had shifted in him, but he was not ready to acknowledge it yet. Getting the survivors back to the extraction point required another full day of travel. They had to move slowly because of the injuries. Food ran out. Water was nearly gone. Tempers should have frayed. The instructors expected the group to fracture. Instead, they pulled together. When Jake stumbled from exhaustion, Gorn simply picked him up and carried him for the next hour without being asked. When rations were divided, everyone made sure the injured survivors got larger portions even though it meant going hungry themselves. Zarth, surprisingly, was the one who found a water source, a small underground spring that kept them hydrated for the last stretch. They reached the extraction point with 3 hours to spare. All survivors accounted for, no one left behind. The dropship descended and the instructors saw something that made Velmora's chest tighten with emotion she did not fully understand. The Predator cadets had arranged themselves in a protective circle around Jake and the injured survivors, watching for threats even though the danger had passed. On the flight back to the station, Zarth finally approached Jake. The Krathen sat down heavily, his golden eyes tired but clear. "I was wrong about you," Zarth said quietly. "You are not weak. You are just strong in a different way." Jake smiled slightly. "You did good out there. Finding that water saved us. You trusted me to cross to the ship even after I challenged you. Why? Because you needed to prove something to yourself, not to me. And because I knew Kira would watch your back." Zarth was quiet for a long moment. "My people, we believe strength is everything. But you showed us something else, something I do not have words for." "Pack," Kira said from across the cabin. "The word is pack." Zarth nodded slowly, testing the concept. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He bowed his head to Jake, a gesture of respect among Krathens that was rarely given to anyone outside their species. Jake reached out and gripped Zarth's shoulder. Not a dominance gesture, just connection. "We are all pack," he said. In the observation room, Velmora watched this exchange and knew that everything was about to change. The other 2 cadet groups had completed their missions, but barely. There had been injuries, conflicts, near disasters, but Jake's group had not only succeeded, they had become something more than the sum of their parts. They had become exactly what Jake had called them, pack, and the galaxy was going to have to figure out what to do about that. The news spread through the academy like wildfire. By the time Jake's group returned from Theta 7, everyone knew what had happened. A human cadet had led a group of predators through a survival scenario with 0 casualties and complete mission success. More importantly, he had turned a fractured group of competitors into a unified team. The implications terrified some and excited others. Within a week, Jake found himself at the center of galactic attention he never wanted. Representatives from various governments arrived at the academy. Military commanders requested meetings. Scientists wanted to study him. The Human Diplomatic Corps sent 3 ambassadors who seemed just as confused by Jake's abilities as everyone else. "We need to understand this," Ambassador Torres said during their first meeting. She was a sharp woman from Earth's Diplomatic Corps, and she looked at Jake like he was both an asset and a problem. "What you did out there, Cadet Chen, it is causing political waves." Jake sat uncomfortably in the conference room. Velmora was there, along with Chixthar and several other Academy officials. "I just helped my team survive. I do not understand why that is a problem." "It is a problem because herbivore species have led the galactic military for 3 centuries, Chixthar said bluntly. "We developed the training methods, the command structures, the entire military doctrine. If humans can achieve better results with predator species, it challenges everything we have built." "I am not trying to challenge anything," Jake protested. "Your intentions do not matter," Torres said. "The results speak for themselves. We have 17 different predator majority worlds requesting human military advisors. The Krathen Empire wants to hire human commanders for their fleet. And back on Earth, certain military factions are very interested in weaponizing your abilities." That last part made Jake's stomach turn. "I am not a weapon." "Of course not," Torres said quickly. "But others might see it differently." Over the next few days, Jake learned exactly how complicated his situation had become. Intelligence agencies wanted to train humans in pack dynamics to create special operations units. Some herbivore politicians called for humans to be banned from military command positions. Predator worlds were offering Jake citizenship and military ranks he had never earned. Through it all, his cohort stayed close. Rexus, Kira, Gorn, even Zarth, they refused to leave him alone with strangers. When a Krathen military recruiter tried to pressure Jake into signing a contract, Rexus physically stepped between them with a low growl. "He is not interested," the young Krathen said. "This is not your concern," the recruiter said. "Everything involving Pack is my concern." The recruiter left, but more came. Offers, threats, promises, demands. Everyone wanted something from Jake, and none of them seemed to care what he actually wanted. Velmora found him alone in the observation deck one evening, staring at the stars. She approached carefully, knowing he was overwhelmed. "I am sorry," she said quietly. Jake glanced at her. "For what?" "For my people, for all of us. We turned your natural abilities into a political crisis. We should have protected you better." "It is not your fault." Jake sighed. "I just wanted to be a good cadet. Maybe serve on a ship somewhere, see the galaxy. I never wanted to be important. But you are important. What you can do, what you understand instinctively, it changes everything." Velmora moved to stand beside him. "I have spent weeks studying Earth's history. Do you know what I found most interesting?" "What?" "Humans did not just domesticate wolves. You formed partnerships with dozens of species. Horses, dogs, cats, birds, even insects like bees. No other species in the galaxy has that pattern. Most predators hunt prey. Most prey flee predators. Humans found a third option: cooperation." Jake thought about that. "My grandfather used to say that the strongest thing humans ever did was figure out we did not have to do everything alone." "Exactly. And that is what frightens the herbivore leadership. We have always survived by being cautious, by establishing clear rules and hierarchies to keep predators under control. You offer a different model, one based on trust instead of fear. That is revolutionary." "I do not want a revolution," Jake said. "I just want my friends to be okay." The door opened behind them. Kira padded in, followed by Gorn and Rexus. They had started following Jake everywhere, a protective detail he had not asked for but secretly appreciated. "We have news," Kira said, her ears flat. "The Academy is being pressured to separate us. Different postings after graduation. They do not want us serving together." "Why?" Jake asked, though he suspected he knew. "Because we are loyal to you, not to the command structure," Gorn rumbled. "That makes traditional military leaders nervous." Rexus's tail lashed. "They can try to separate us. We will refuse." "You cannot refuse orders," Jake pointed out. "Watch us," Rexus said flatly. This was getting out of control. Jake had never wanted to disrupt military structure or challenge authority. He had just wanted to treat people with respect. But somehow that simple act had turned into a galactic incident. Ambassador Torres called another meeting. This time, she had representatives from the Galactic Military Council with her, along with leaders from several predator worlds. The room was tense with competing interests. "We need a solution," Torres said. "The current situation is unsustainable." "Cadet Chen, you need to make a choice. On what choice?" Jake asked warily. A Krathan admiral leaned forward. "Join us. The Empire will give you a command position. Your own ship, your choice of crew. You can write your own future." "No," said a Vexian representative. "The Vexian packs offer better terms. We understand pack dynamics in ways the Krathans never will." "Enough," Chixthar said firmly. "Cadet Chen is a student at this academy. He will complete his training before any career decisions are made." "Will he, though?" Torres asked quietly. "Because from what I understand, there are factions on several worlds willing to take him by force if necessary." The threat hung in the air. Jake felt sick. This was what his life had become. A political asset to be fought over. Velmora stood abruptly. "This is unacceptable. Cadet Chen is under Academy protection. Any attempt to remove him by force will be treated as an act of war. The Academy cannot protect him forever," the Krathan admiral said. "Eventually he will have to choose." "Then let him choose on his own terms," Velmora shot back. Without pressure, without threats. The meeting dissolved into arguments. Jake slipped out quietly, needing air. His cohort followed him, as they always did now. In the quiet of the training yard, Jake finally spoke. "I am sorry. I never meant for any of this." "You have nothing to apologize for," Kira said firmly. "This is not about you. It is about power. About who controls what." "She is right," Zarth added. The Krathan had changed so much since Theta 7. The herbivore species have led the military for centuries. They do not want to give that up. And predator worlds see you as a way to gain advantage. None of them care about you. They care about what you represent. "What do I represent?" Jake asked tiredly. "Change," Gorn said simply. "The possibility that things could be different, better." Jake looked at his friends, his pack. They had risked everything for him. They had stood against their own species' expectations, against military pressure, against tradition. And they were still here. "I do not want to be a political tool," Jake said. "I do not want to be a weapon or a symbol. I just want to work with people I trust, doing something that matters." Then that is what we will do, Rexus said. Together. They will try to separate us. Let them try, Kira said, and the others growled agreement. Jake realized something then. He had been thinking about this all wrong. He had been seeing himself as the problem, the disruption. But maybe the real problem was a system that treated cooperation as a threat instead of a strength. What if we did not try to fit into their system? Jake said slowly. What if we created something new? What do you mean? Velamora asked. She had followed them outside. The military, the governments, they all want to use what we have. But what we have is not a weapon or a tactic. It is just people working together because they want to, not because they have to. What if that is what the galaxy actually needs? Velamora's eyes widened. You were talking about changing how the entire military operates. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe just proving there's another way. A better way. It was an impossible idea, too big, too ambitious. But looking at his pack, at the predators who had chosen to follow him not because they had to, but because they wanted to, Jake thought maybe impossible was just another challenge to overcome. The question was whether the galaxy would let them try. The final examination came 3 months later. It was called the War Games, and it was the Academy's ultimate test. 4 cohorts would compete against each other in a massive simulation. The objective was simple: capture the central command point and hold it for 12 hours. There were no rules except victory, no restrictions on tactics. It was meant to simulate real warfare where anything goes. Jake's cohort drew the worst starting position, the farthest from the objective. The instructors had done that deliberately. 3 other cohorts would have time to form an alliance against Jake's group. The Academy leadership wanted to see what happened when the humans' methods faced overwhelming odds. They wanted to see him fail. The night before the exercise, Jake gathered his cohort in their common room. 40 predators looked at him with absolute trust. Even Zarth, who had once challenged him, now sat in the front row waiting for his words. Tomorrow is going to be hard, Jake said. We are outnumbered and outpositioned. Command expects us to lose, Daider. We will not lose, Rexus said immediately, and others growled agreement. Maybe not, Jake said, but I need you all to understand something. I am not your commander. I never have been. We are pack. That means we make decisions together. So I am asking you now, do we play their game or do we do something they will not expect? What are you thinking? Kira asked, her ears perked forward with interest. Jake pulled up a holographic map of the exercise area. They expect us to fight our way to the objective. But what if we do not fight at all? What if we change the game? He outlined his idea. It was risky, maybe crazy. It went against everything the Academy taught about military tactics. But his cohort listened, and as he talked, he saw understanding dawn in their eyes. This could get us all failed out, Gorn rumbled. Or it could change everything. I vote we try it, Zarth said. Safe tactics are for herbivores. We are predators. We take risks, the others agreed. They spent the night preparing, not for battle, but for something entirely different. The war games began at dawn. The instructors monitored from orbit, watching 4 colored dots on their screens representing the cohorts. Red, blue, green, and yellow. Jake's cohort was yellow, red, blue, and green immediately began moving toward the central objective, just as expected. But yellow did something strange. They split into small groups and moved away from the objective, toward the other cohort's starting positions. What are they doing? Chixthar asked, confused. Velamora leaned forward, studying the screens. She had a suspicion, but it seemed impossible, even for Jake. The first contact came when Jake and 3 others walked into Red Cohort's camp. They were unarmed. Their hands were raised. The Red Cohort, led by an aggressive Thurian named Rock, surrounded them immediately. You surrender already? Rock laughed. Smart move, human. We are not surrendering, Jake said calmly. We are here to talk. Talk? Rock moved closer, using his size to intimidate. This is war, not a debate, is it? Jake asked. Think about it. Command put us out here to fight each other, but who benefits from that? Not us. We will all just exhaust ourselves fighting over some arbitrary objective while the instructors watch and take notes. We are not enemies. We are all just cadets trying to graduate. So what are you suggesting? Asked a Vexian from Red Cohort, sounding intrigued despite herself. I am suggesting we stop playing the game they designed and make our own rules. Work together instead of tearing each other apart, Rock snarled. That is cheating. The rules say no restrictions on tactics, Jake pointed out. Cooperation is a tactic. He spent the next hour talking with Red Cohort. Not all of them were convinced, but enough were interested to listen. Jake used everything he had learned about reading predators. He identified the ones who were tired of always fighting, the ones who were curious, the ones who respected strength but also valued intelligence. Slowly, Red Cohort's unified front cracked. Meanwhile, other members of Jake's cohort were doing the same thing with Blue and Green. Kira talked with the Vexians. Gorn connected with fellow Thurians. Rexus spoke to young Krathens who, like him, were starting to question whether constant aggression was the only way. The instructors watched in growing alarm as something unprecedented happened. The cohorts did not fight. Instead, they talked. They shared supplies. They started cooperating. "This is not acceptable," Chixthar said. "They are violating the spirit of the exercise." "They are not violating any actual rules," Velmora pointed out. "You said no restrictions on tactics. Jake found a tactic you did not anticipate." By the afternoon, Jake had done the impossible. He walked into the central command point not with his cohort, but with representatives from all 4 cohorts. Nearly 200 cadets working together. They captured the objective without firing a shot. Then they did something that made the instructors' mandibles click in disbelief. They held a meeting. Right there in the middle of the war games, they organized a democratic discussion about what they should do next. "The instructors want to see us fight," a blue cohort Krathen said. "If we do not give them a battle, they will call this a failure." "Let them," Jake said. "We know what we achieved here. That is what matters." But others were not convinced. The programming ran deep. Predators were supposed to compete, to establish dominance, to fight. Then Zarth stood up. The Krathen who had once challenged Jake now spoke in his defense. "I used to think like you," Zarth said. "I thought strength was everything, that the strongest should lead and the weak should follow. But Jake taught me something different. He showed me that real strength is not about who can beat who in a fight. It is about who you can trust to have your back, who makes you better instead of just making you afraid." Rexus stood next. "My people prize aggression, but aggression without purpose is just violence. Jake gave us purpose. He made us pack." One by one, members of Jake's original cohort stood and spoke. They talked about Theta 7, about how cooperation had saved lives. They talked about how it felt to be part of something bigger than themselves. They talked about pack, and slowly the others began to understand. A Vexian from Blue Cohort stood. "What you are describing, this pack, can it include all of us? Even those who are not part of your original group?" Jake smiled. "Pack is not about where you started. It is about where you choose to be." The meeting continued for hours. Not everyone agreed. Some cadets, particularly the most aggressive, refused to participate, but the majority stayed. They talked about how military training had always been about breaking them down, forcing them into rigid hierarchies, using fear to create obedience. What if there was another way? The exercise officially ended at the 12-hour mark. The instructors called all cadets back to the transport ships. The debriefing room was packed with confused officials, angry traditionalists, and fascinated observers. Chixthar stood at the front, his insectoid features radiating disapproval. "What you did today was a mockery of military discipline. You ignored the purpose of the exercise." "No," Jake said quietly. "We redefined it." "You cannot just redefine military exercises because you feel like it, Cadet Chen." "Why not?" Jake asked. "You said no restrictions. You wanted to see what we would do under pressure with no rules limiting us. We showed you that cooperation is possible even between species that have been taught to compete. That trust can be stronger than fear. That pack bonds can form even between people who started as strangers. Those are not military values," Chixthar said. "Maybe they should be," Velmora said, standing up. She had been quiet until now, but she could not stay silent any longer. "I have watched you all teach these young predators that the only way to lead is through dominance and fear." But Cadet Chen achieved better results with trust and respect. His cohort has the highest performance scores, the lowest conflict rates, and the strongest unit cohesion of any group in Academy history. Maybe it is time we admitted that our methods are not the only ones that work. The room erupted in argument. Herbivore instructors defended their methods. Predator world representatives demanded changes. Human diplomats tried to mediate. It was chaos, but Jake noticed something. The cadets, all 200 who had participated in the exercise, were not arguing. They stood together, unified across species and cohort lines. They had experienced something that the instructors could not understand from outside. They had felt what pack could be. In the weeks that followed, the Academy was forced to make decisions. They could not ignore what had happened. The War Games incident had been recorded, analyzed, discussed across the entire galactic military. Opinion was divided sharply. Some saw it as dangerous, a human manipulation that could destabilize military hierarchy. Others saw it as revolutionary, a new model for cooperation. But everyone agreed it could not be ignored. The Academy's solution was compromise. They would create a new program, experimental, focused on integrated unit tactics. Jake would not be forced into traditional command structure. Instead, he would be allowed to continue developing his methods, but under observation and study. It was not perfect, but it was a start. On graduation day, Jake stood with his cohort. They had all passed, all been assigned to the same posting by special exception. They would serve together on a diplomatic vessel, making first contact with newly discovered species. It was perfect for what they had become, not just warriors, but